Hello, everybody. Professor Barth here, history professor at the great Arizona State University. Well, today we are going to address a broad range of subjects that deal with culture and with power. And in order to make this video more manageable, I have decided to break it up into segments, and I have made a playlist. So you start with segment 1, and then when segment 1 is finished, it automatically goes to segment 2. And I do this so if you want to watch one segment at a time, say you watch segment 1 today, and then tomorrow you watch segment 2, or perhaps you'll watch all of them all at once. That's up to you, however you want to view it. But I encourage you to watch each segment. The first 2 segments will be lighthearted and fun, relatively speaking. By the 3rd segment, things will get a bit hardcore, all right? In a good way, I think. So stick around. It will be worth it. I can promise you that. But I do want to begin with a seemingly light topic, but actually I think it's a bit serious. And it deals with how we communicate with one another. It deals with text messaging. Text messaging. And I love text messaging, right? Oh, yeah, most definitely. I don't text all the time. I suppose some people text a whole lot more than I do. But I do have a small coterie of friends who I indulge with in semi-frequent text messaging. And oftentimes we have very deep and lengthy conversations. And I would say, all in all, I find texting to be extremely delightful. That being said, texting also has problems. And texting has problems that are rooted, interestingly enough, in the very things that make texting so delightful. And so I want to analyze the text message, and in so doing, we are going to identify what makes texting so distinct from other forms of communication. We used to have 2 very broad categories of communication: verbal communication and written communication. In the last 15 years, however, a third way has emerged. And that third way is texting. So let's briefly analyze each. With verbal communication, phone, Skype, or in person, communication happens instantaneously. And because of this, it also allows for greater spontaneity. It is easy to bounce around different topics throughout the conversation in ways that you would not otherwise expect, and in a more spontaneous fashion than you would get under written communication. One obvious drawback of verbal communication is that you cannot edit your words. Okay, we all know how much of a drawback this can be. How many times have we verbalized something that we wish we could have sat down and carefully thought over? One final benefit that I will mention of verbal communication is the ability to convey emotion through tone of voice or through facial expressions in ways that writing, and even the best of writing, cannot fully capture. And because emotion is so easily conveyed in verbal communication. We become more sensitive to the other party. We are more conscious that the other person is indeed real and that the words we communicate have a real impact on them. Written communication comes with drawbacks and benefits as well. For one, there is a delay in the transmission of words. This is true even of email, unless you are conversing over email in live time, which is not very common with email. Now, this delay can be beneficial in the sense that it forces one to carefully ponder their own words, but it can, it's obviously inconvenient if you need immediate conversation. And it also results in less spontaneity in conversation. The greatest asset, of course, of written communication is that you can edit your words. This allows for greater thought, and it allows you the ability to flesh out ideas in a way that is more difficult to do on the spot. The ability to edit your words. One last thing about written communication. Emotion is more difficult to convey with written communication, right? Not impossible, but definitely more difficult. And because you cannot physically see or hear the other person, the realness of that person is less evident than under verbal communication. All right, well, what about texting? What about texting? Texting in very interesting ways borrows elements from verbal and written communication and then morphs those elements into something entirely unique. So much so that it deserves its own separate category. To start, texting is not quite as instantaneous as verbal communication. You may take a minute, a few minutes, or even a few hours to compose a message or to reply. And yet it's far more instantaneous than written communication, including email, unless, again, you are emailing in live time. And very often, a conversation over text will occur almost as rapidly as if you were talking over the phone or in person. That this particular element in text messaging allows for greater spontaneity than any form of written communication. And yet, this is where it really gets interesting. Because texting is not entirely instantaneous, in a sense that you can take some time before you reply, there is a greater ability, like written communication, to consider your words and to carefully craft a sentence with the ability to edit. That's the key. The ability to edit. And to be clear, this ability is not matched the degree to which we see editing with written communication. All right? We edit very quickly and rapidly with our text. Written communication is drawn out. But no doubt, this distinguishes texting from verbal communication, and it distinguishes texting very much from verbal communication. For example, texting, for this reason, in my opinion, you may disagree, allows for a higher degree of wit in conversation. Let me explain why. Verbal communication, granted, does allow for wit. But when you have a few minutes to gather your thoughts, compose a message, edit that message, and then send it off, it amplifies your ability to communicate in a witty manner. This is just one example of what I see as a benefit of texting. And this is true whether you are having a lighthearted conversation or a deep or even a philosophical conversation. And to be completely honest, some of the greatest philosophical conversations that I have ever had have been over text, believe it or not. Some of the greatest. And it makes me wish that I had saved some of those conversations because, I mean, some of them were just absolutely fantastic. And so with texting, we have this strange combination. The transmission of a text occurs instantaneously, and conversations occur rapidly, allowing for spontaneity. And yet, there is time to consider and to edit what you say before you say it. And this is primarily what I consider is the basis behind the benefits of text messaging.